Good evening. Thanks for joining me, Dorothea, on Through an Orthodox Christian Lens. It is July 27th, 2025. I have some stories to share with you regarding our economic situation. I'd like to say that it's been not so great for my son's generations, both of them. Generation, Z, I believe. It's not been too great for them. I tell you, I can tell the difference between how it was when I was at their age, in early to mid 20s, what the job market was like for me, which was I'd gone to business college, and so in the early 90s, you would look in the newspaper for jobs, the classifieds. And there, I had a business degree, administrative assistant degree. I was learning on the newer software at that time of WordPerfect, believe it or not, even the Wayne computers, which the government was using mostly of at that time. And I remember opening the newspapers and seeing literally columns of job positions in my field, and so there wasn't a lack of good jobs at that time, and I could apply for so many. It was amazing. That's not the case now. It's really, it's much harder. And my problem is that I had children. I stayed home. I stayed at home mom. I had a special needs child. And so I spent, 20 years basically, 18 to 20 years spending it as a stay-at-home mom. And all the skills that I had learned when I was 21 were obsolete by the time, other than the fact that I could type really well, but the software and everything was pretty much, not the same, obviously, than what I had learned on. And what I've found that I've struggled with now is I cannot remember doing online courses because I'm a hands-on person, and if I'm going to learn these software systems like Excel or whatever other one it may be, it would be something that I'd have to work on for several months, at least a month or more, doing that on the system, hands-on, practicing. And it's just been really hard for me to do that online. So I'm just letting you know that that's my cat knocking over everything again. She's always showing up in my videos, isn't she? But in any case, so that's been hard for me. And as I told you, months ago, that my sons live with me as well as one of their friends, and we really can't live on our own because of the fact of we have to combine our incomes to live in this house, to afford to live in this house. So I wanted to share that with you, that it's been tough, and the opportunities aren't the same today, in my opinion. And I'm going to share some interesting information on the difference in the wages as well. As you know, there's been stagnation over the years since the 70s, and how, my view is a living wage, meaning if you're working full-time in a position, a decent position, you're working full-time hours, 40 hours a week, generally speaking. If you're doing that, you should be able to afford rent and utilities, and you should be able to afford a certain type of a mortgage payment. And people need help to put down payments. Put down, a down payment on even with the rent. It's ridiculous. So, let alone the mortgage, down payments and all that other stuff. It's very difficult. I'm going to share some information here. First, it's going to be the wage stagnation in 9 charts from Economic Policy Institute, Raising America's Pay. Our country has suffered from rising income inequality and chronically slow growth in the living standards of low and moderate income Americans. I can relate. This disappointing living standards growth, which was in fact caused by rising income inequality, preceded the Great Recession and continues to this day. Fortunately, income inequality and middle-class living standards are now squarely on the political agenda, but despite their increasing salience, these issues are too often discussed in abstract terms. Ignored is the easy-to-understand root of rising income inequality, slow living standards growth, and a host of other key economic challenges. The near stagnation of hourly wage growth for the vast majority of American workers over the past generation. Countering that by generating broad-based wage growth is our core economic policy challenge. And by the way, it's hard to find, at least when I've been looking for jobs, I'm only working at a restaurant here, as I said, because I had to go back into the workforce after 20 years or whatever, and, basically start over, which was horrible. And it's even harder at my age because there's a lot of age discrimination, especially for women. But in any case, it's very hard to find jobs that are salary paid, unless you're in white collar work. Everything's hourly, and it's very hard to get benefits today unless you are working full time for so long. It's a lot of things are not the way they used to be. Pensions aren't around as much anymore. It's harder to get a pension. You used to be able to work at a company for like 20 years or more, and you would automatically get a pension in the white collar world, at least, and even in the blue collar world, they had those as well. So, yeah, it's just a totally different world now, and it's just not as abundant as it was before. So, with a group of simple charts, this paper brings the challenge we face into sharp focus and lends clarity to the steps we must take to meet it. It should not be surprising that trends in hourly wage growth have profound consequences for American living standards. After all, the vast majority of Americans rely on their paychecks to make ends meet. For these families, the bulk of income comes from wages and employer-provided benefits, followed by other income sources linked to jobs, such as wage-based tax credits, pensions, and social insurance. Yes, which is what I was just talking about. And if it's a burden on the companies, I do believe that we should have some kind of healthcare system for everybody. I believe that your health is vital to life, but I know some people who don't agree with that. They don't agree with me on that, but that's just my view. Let's see. Wage-related income also accounts for the majority of total income among the bottom fifth of households. Wage stagnation for the vast majority was not created by abstract economic trends. Rather, wages were suppressed by policy choices made on behalf of those with the most income, wealth, and power. In the past few decades, the American economy generated lots of income and wealth that would have allowed substantial living standards gains for every family. The same is true looking forward. Overall income and wealth will continue to grow. The key economic policy question is whether we will adopt policies that enable everyone to participate in a shared prosperity, or whether the growth of income and wealth will continue to accrue excessively and disproportionately to the best off 1%. The first policy choice should be to quickly restore full employment. The Federal Reserve Board can do this by not raising interest rates and slowing the recovery in the name of fighting inflationary pressures until wage growth is much, much stronger. Congress and the president can pursue the return to full employment by making public investments that can create both jobs and future productivity growth. After this, policymakers should support those labor standards that can restore some bargaining power to low and moderate wage workers in coming years. That means policy actions such as passing a higher minimum wage, expanding rights to overtime pay, and providing paid sick leave, protecting the labor rights of undocumented, workers, and restoring the right to collective bargaining. In any case, let's go through the cost of inequality to middle class households. So this figure shows that the stakes of rising inequality for the broad American middle class are enormous. The figure compares the income growth of the middle 3/5 of American households since 1979 to their income growth had there been no growth in inequality. In 2007, the last year before the Great Recession, the average income of the middle 60% of American households was $76,443. It would have been $94,310, roughly 23%, nearly $18,000 higher had inequality not widened. Example, had their incomes grown at the overall average rate and overall average buoyed by stratospheric growth at the very top. The temporary dip in top incomes during the Great Recession did little to shrink that inequality tax, which stood at 16%, nearly $12,000 in 2011. The U.S. middle class had $17,867 less income in 2007 because of the growth in inequality since 1979. You can see that in the chart here, how it's changed over the time. So the wage trends for the last 3 decades, the gap between the growth of productivity and that of a typical worker's pay. The figure shows that the 3 decades following World War II, hourly compensation of the vast majority of workers rose 91%, roughly in line with productivity growth of 97%. But for most of the past generation, except for a brief period in the late 1990s, pay for the vast majority lagged further and further behind overall productivity. From 1973 to 2013, hourly compensation of a typical production non-supervisory worker rose just 9%. While productivity increased 74%. This breakdown of pay growth has been especially evident in the last decade, affecting both college and non-college educated workers, as well as blue and white collar workers. This means that workers have been producing far more than they receive in their paychecks and benefit packages from their employers. So you can see that in the chart here. Quite a gap. Wage growth of the top 1%. So the ability of those at the very top to claim an ever larger share of overall wages is evident in this figure. Two things stand out. First is the extraordinary rapid growth of annual wages for the top 1% compared with everybody else. Top 1% wages grew 138%, while wages of the bottom 90% grew just 15%. If the wages of the bottom 90% had grown at the average pace over this period, meaning that wages grew equally across the board, then the bottom 90%'s wages would have grown by 32%, more than double the actual growth, as you can see here. Really disgusting, in my opinion. And stagnant wages for middle wage workers, declining wages for low wage workers. So we have that in the chart here. Middle class wages are stagnant. Middle wage workers' hourly wage is up 6% since 1979. Low wage workers' wages are down 5%. While those with very high wages saw a 41% increase. Now, how is that even fair? Really? I mean, that's pretty disgusting. What people are doing at the middle wage and low wage doesn't mean it's not any less of value than those with higher wages. I don't think. These people, their job is important to them. Their job is a necessity. It's a needed contribution to this country's economic system. So here we have the wage and benefit plight of recent college graduates. The widespread problem of stagnant hourly wages is not a problem of insufficiently skilled or educated workers. So, as the figure shows, a 4-year college degree has been no guarantee of decent wage growth. In 2013, inflation-adjusted hourly wages of young college graduates were lower than they were in the late 1990s, a trend that held for both young male and female college graduates. Thus, wage stagnation and erosion afflict even the one-third of workers who have earned a 4-year college degree. And we see it here. And you can see I'm in the women's group here, and not looking so hot for me, especially since in my age group there's a lot of age discrimination that I have run into for sure. Also, recent college graduates have been less and less able to find jobs that provide health insurance. That's why I'm saying we should have a universal care, kind of like TRICARE in the military. It worked really well. We should have something like that, Medicaid or something for everyone. And if the businesses aren't wanting to provide, and it's either way for me. I don't think it's necessary for them to the businesses have to do it. I think it can be done through the government. I know people, we don't want the government. And there is a two-edged sword to that. It's good to have it because it's usually pretty dependent. It's reliable through the government, but at some point it could be a detrimental thing if we go the direction of less a democratic republic system to more of a authoritarian or dictatorship, which you never know. I mean, this country's falling apart as it is. So, the share of young college graduates who have employer-sponsored health insurance coverage fell from 61% in 1989 to 31% by 2012. That's wow. Most of this health benefit erosion occurred since 2000, when just over half, 53% of recent college graduates had employer-provided health insurance. For high school graduates, the decline was even steeper, from 24% in 1989 to just 7% in 2012. Wow. So they talk about the CEO pay grabs, a large share of the wages. CEOs now make 296 times what a typical worker earns, which is outrageous. Outrageous. Look at this chart. It's outrageous. That was from 1965 to 2013. Policy choices regarding the minimum wage fuel wage inequality. Yes, while pay at the top of the labor market has outpaced nearly every labor market indicator for decades, pay at the bottom, the federal minimum wage, has severely lagged. This figure shows the decline in the real inflation-adjusted value of the minimum wage since its high in 1968, as well as what the federal minimum wage would be today if it had kept pace with the growth of real hourly wages of production and non-supervisory workers, who make up 80% of the workforce, or economy-wide productivity. So the minimum wage would be over $18, I'm assuming that means an hour, had it risen along with productivity. As you see. It's really, really pitiful. Now I'm going to go into I'm just giving you an example here in Colorado Springs. To keep up with this is an example, the cost of living, a single adult should ideally earn around $23.88 per hour. Well, I definitely don't make that. And I read that it's even high, it's up to like 30. But, I guess it depends on what area you're in. Colorado Springs is more the cheaper area compared to like Denver or Boulder or, other cities in Colorado. So there's that issue. And of course, factors influencing the required wage, family size, location, taxes, etc. Now, if you're single adult, no children, living wage should be $23.88. 2 working adults with 2 children, if both adults work, living wage is $44.29. And in Colorado, the minimum wage is currently $14.81. Okay, but let's recall that the federal minimum wage is officially a poverty wage in 2025. So anybody that actually is daring to try to, any company that's daring to say, oh, well, we're going to just give you $7.25 an hour. I don't know any company that's doing that. But if they were, a single adult working full-time year-round at $7.25 an hour now falls below the poverty threshold of $15,650 a year. I mean, can you believe anybody would actually be doing that? So, important things here to understand. As I said, I look at jobs out there every now and then and see what's out there, and it's not great. And as I said, my sons are, and their friend, their jobs are in restaurants, business, doing restaurant work, and not at just a team member, not a manager or anything. And obviously you can't live on that salary, but it's almost like nowadays with fast food, even in fast food restaurants, it's become that now this is your regular job. It's not one of those, because as you know, years ago when I was going working and everything in the 90s and all that, is that, and especially the 80s, 90s, whatever, working fast food jobs was considered a stepping stone to your first job as a teen, and then to move into other work afterwards, to move up. But now these are actually people are doing this for a regular job. That's what they have. It's pretty sad. And I can relate because I'm working at a restaurant myself. So I wanted to pinpoint that for you, point that one out. And then I also wanted to bring up this issue. Why can't today's young adults leave the nest? Blame high housing costs. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Nearly 1/3, or 31% of Generation Z, are living with their parents because they can't afford to buy or rent their own space, according to a recent report. The year 2023 was the least affordable home buying year in more than a decade. So, for parents, supporting grown children can be a substantial drain when their own financial security is at risk, yes. However, there are also economic benefits to living in multi-generational households, yes, because people are putting all of their money together to get a decent place to live, which is what we've been doing. But, it's sad that my kids can't have their own independent places and be on their own. It feels kind of strange. It's just like a totally different world since I was a teen and in my 20s. So I'm going to go to a video. Let's see if I can find it. This one. I'm going to play this for you. She's describing what's going on now in the past month. So I want you to listen to what she has to say. This what's her name again? Lena Petrova. Okay, so let's hear what she says.
Talk about the U.S. labor market. There are very bad signs that you might want to be aware of. The U.S. labor market is showing alarming signs of underlying weakness. According to recent data in May, full-time employment dropped by 623,000 jobs. 623,000 jobs, the fourth largest monthly decline in the past 5 years. It also marked the second monthly decrease so far this year. So as a result, the share of full-time jobs in the labor force slipped to 79%, which is the lowest reading, the lowest level since August of 2021. This reading has actually been trending downward for 3 consecutive years. The ongoing decline in labor intensity suggests weakening demand for full-time positions. Warning signs in the job market are really becoming difficult to ignore. Now, there is even worse news for young college graduates. Despite their degrees, despite their internships and debt, of course, we can't forget that, many recent college grads are actually hitting a wall, and not just anecdotal. According to the New York Federal Reserve, labor conditions for recent college graduates have, quote, deteriorated noticeably in recent months. Unemployment for new grads now stands at 4.8%, and this is an unusually high level. Even MBA grads from top schools are struggling to find work these days in the United States. Meanwhile, law school applications are surging, echoing the bunker mentality, if you will, of the 2008 financial crisis. So what's really going on? Let's talk about the possible reasons for this. There are 3 scenarios that I will include in today's video. First, the labor market for young people never fully recovered. Not from the pandemic, and maybe not even from the Great Recession. After 2009's peak unemployment, the recovery was very long and it was very slow. Many companies froze hiring or downsized, which made it especially tough for young people without any prior experience to enter the workforce. Then, just as the economy seemed to rebound, the pandemic hit. Inflation spiked, as you might recall. The Federal Reserve raised interest rates to cool demand, and that cooling hit white-collar industries really hard. Tech was especially slammed. Job openings in software and IT operations plunged, and since 2022, around that time, software programming job postings on Indeed have dropped by over 50%. For new grads hoping to break into tech, into consulting or finance, the market just isn't what it used to be. Not anymore. Now, the second theory is much deeper. College no longer delivers the same edge in the labor market that it did maybe 15 or even 10 years ago. According to research from the San Francisco Fed, 2010 marked a turning point when the lifetime earnings gap between college grads and high school grads stopped growing. That was back in 2010. Now, at the same time, fewer online job listings are asking for college degrees. College still pays off on average, of course, but the problem is return is less predictable. And with rising tuition, the uncertainty feels more risky, and so many people choose not to go to college. The shrinking college premium is good news for non-college workers, of course, but it does add a new layer of pressure for those who did go to school and now have an enormous debt to pay off over the next many years. Okay, so what is the third theory? And this is the scariest one. Artificial intelligence is actually quietly transforming the economy and not in favor of recent grads. Think about it. What are entry-level white-collar workers often tasked with? What are they tasked to do? They're reading and summarizing information, they're producing reports, they're creating presentations, and so these are exactly the kinds of tasks that are outsourced to generative AI, and it can perform them very well, virtually at no cost. As companies adopt AI tools, they may be finding that small and tech-savvy teams can do the work of larger junior staff groups. So that is going to be a major issue for new grads moving forward. And of course, it will make some professions completely obsolete in the near term. This brings us to something economists are calling the recent grad gap, the difference between the unemployment rate of young college graduates and that of the overall labor force. For decades, that gap has been positive. Young grads have historically had lower unemployment because they are relatively cheap and they're freshly trained, so they typically didn't struggle to find entry-level roles in their professions. But last month, that gap hit an all-time low. That happened last month. That means today's college grads are facing worse job prospects than the average American worker ever did. That's never happened before. This may be what it looks like when entry-level white-collar jobs begin to disappear in certain professions. And I would argue that that is exactly the case. That's what's going on. In law firms, for example, AI is taking over paralegal tasks. In consulting, teams are using AI to replace entry-level analysts. In tech, elite developers are using AI to co-pilot, and that actually replaces junior coders. So the entry level might be shrinking before our eyes, and it is something that is driving the labor force changes that I mentioned in the very beginning of this
video. Yes, this is, again, very concerning. And we know that a recession is on the way. I think we're already in it, but I'm understanding it's going to get worse. I'm going to now share with you this portion of MOATS show with George Galloway interviewing Colonel Macgregor. I think it's very important to hear what he has to say here, so I'm going to play that.
Of France, I saw some writing of yours, which struck me as very apposite, comparing the Western Empire at this moment with the atmosphere of Versailles just before the tumbrils, just before Madame Guillotine. And it struck a real chord with me, Colonel. Do expand on it for the audience, please.
Well, you know, George, the thing that we have figured out in the United States is that our ballot box is broken. Everything that Trump is doing are things that Biden would have done or did do. In fact, one can argue that he's extended the Biden policies and made them worse, when in fact he was elected on the assumption that he would put an end to those policies and extricate us, that he would shed unnecessary overseas commitments, that he would reduce spending in order to cope with this enormous national sovereign debt. What's he done? He's done the opposite. What has Congress done? The same thing, the opposite. The uniparty is now in the hands of these multi-billionaires that decide policy. And right now, policy says we've got to go to war with people. We have to defeat them and bring them back in line. It's not possible. Militarily, we can't do it. We're already overstretched and overwhelmed. We're broke financially. We're not going to scare anybody or threaten anybody into investing in our country by buying treasuries. It's not going to happen. So the American people do not understand the intricacies of the financial system, but they figured out it doesn't matter who you vote for. You get the same kind of fool and maniac. People say often, well, it doesn't matter who you vote for, you get John McCain. Well, John McCain was a hell of a lot more rational than what we're seeing right now. So I hate to say that about John McCain because I met him and knew him. He's a very nice person, and I didn't agree with everything he did, but he was rational. The point is that this is not rational anymore. And he doesn't seem to care because I don't think he understands the true state of affairs. He does not understand that we do not have limitless military power. He does not understand that the world desperately needs us. It doesn't. Our market is not the only game in town. China is the principal market. It's going to be the principal market for a very long time. And everybody forgets that for 2,000 years, China, for the most part, was the richest country in the world. China is simply regaining the position that it once had. You can go to the Shanghai Gold Exchange. You can go to their SIPS system instead of the SWIFT system. You don't need us anymore. And people more and more are doing business in their own currency. So the bottom line is his gut instinct, which tells him the way to win an argument is to bully your opponent, is wrong. But he doesn't get it.
No, and even when he's not bullying, when he's flattering, like he was implausibly flattering Mrs. von der Leyen today, I mean, I don't know if you are as big a fan as I am of the Fine Young Cannibals. They were a very hip group some decades ago in Britain. And one of their great songs was I'm Not the Man I Used to Be.
I just have to interrupt there because he said that, and I was like, hey, I had that cassette tape of Fine Young Cannibals, and yes, that is really excellent song, and it just reminded me when he said it, I hadn't heard about it in so long, so I played it after listening to this video because, you know, you always like to remember those songs from your 20s and things like that.
I'm not the man I used to be. You're not the man you used to be. And Donald Trump is showing me daily now that he's not the man he used to be even 10 years ago, maybe even less time ago than that. I see a physical and mental decline in Donald Trump. And that means the second US president in a row doesn't have all their marbles, doesn't have all their spoons in the hamper. And I'm wondering if this is at all dawning on the American public.
Oh, I think it has. And that's why I say Americans are increasingly convinced that the ballot box does not work. Now, that's very dangerous, George, if you stop and think about that for a minute. Mm-hmm. I mean, those of us who are serious about our American citizenship, those of us who have served our country, I mean, there are millions of us, and to finally conclude that voting is an utterly pointless affair means that our republic, for all intents and purposes, is a facade, a fraud. That's a very dangerous place to be. That is more and more widely accepted inside the United States. This bodes ill, especially as you go into a financial crisis and stop and consider what happens if we're stupid enough, and I mean stupid, to provoke a wider war with Russia and China as well as Iran. That makes no sense at all. We're not prepared for that. We don't have the missile stocks. We don't have the munitions factories. We don't have the production base. And yet I hear the popular propaganda that comes out of the administration is China, that's the real enemy. They harmed us. We lost our production base to China. Well, China didn't rob us of our manufacturing base. That was the CEO class and their shareholders. They shipped it overseas. They were the ones that destroyed America's middle class. But that plays well. I don't know how much longer it will play well, but that's the sort of thing people are resorting to try and hold things together. I don't think it'll work. I'm beginning to wonder if this Epstein thing is probably going to bring President Trump down. And the reason I say that is that we are discovering something that they discovered in France in the 1780s, that this aristocratic class, in our case, the top 1%, that's really ruling the country, is unworthy of that role. They are degenerate. They are decayed. They have no business governing us. And they do so exclusively because they control the financial system. These are not Rockefellers who built oil industries. These are not people that built plate glass industries or automobiles. Those people are gone. The only one that can arguably say that he's built anything lately is probably Musk. But the rest of it, forget it. These people are financial capitalists. They made billions through financializing the system. Transaction fee after transaction fee after transaction fee. But what does that produce for the American people? Nothing. It impoverishes us. It destroys our jobs. So that's where we are. And I think that's where the French were in 1789. They suddenly became disgusted. The one person that they believed in almost to the bitter end was the king. And it became impossible to believe him any longer. And ultimately it brought everything down. Well, a lot of people have believed in Trump. They thought he was different. And you know what they're discovering, George? He's not. He's exactly like the people we voted against.
Wow. Well said, Colonel Macgregor. Yep. You know, and as I said, I don't think I'm going to be voting anymore. And if we feel like we can't, it doesn't do any good for us to vote. I mean, look, you're no longer, this country would be no longer a democratic republic, but it would be some kind of dictatorship. So, you know, the direction we're going is not good. And, you know, this is a declining empire. It's how historical empires go. They turn to militaristic things instead of taking care of their citizens. And this downhill projection has been going on for quite a few decades now. I'm going to end this show with one last video where I'm going to remind everybody of this portion of the prophecies during World War III in America, other than, of course, the volcanoes, the natural disasters, the earthquake that's supposed to happen, and all these things. But I'm going to be centering on this last portion that has to do with the people, and everything going wrong direction. So the economy and everything. So let me play that part for you.
On June 8th, 2020, the elder said, "The fall of a great American empire will commence with a widespread uprising and will ultimately be completed by a devastating earthquake along the San Andreas Fault." On January 29th,
So he's saying there's going to be this uprising. And people, as you know, are getting sick of this. They're tired. They've been wanting somebody else. They wanted somebody that would actually represent them. Just like Colonel Macgregor said, they really were hoping, this was like the last straw, with Trump. People were desperate for something different. They just went and they took a risk on this, and then they find out that he's no different. And I don't think that's going to bode well. And as you see, it's not, according to this Orthodox Christian elder who wanted to remain anonymous, but he is saying this is going to happen, and he's pretty sure he's I don't know what he is, but I don't know what nationality he is. I'm guessing he probably is Greek, but it may not be. Let's just see what else he has to say.
9th, 2021, the elder provided further clarification, stating, "In America, great and terrible events will unfold, possibly igniting widespread unrest among the people. Yes, even a civil war. If such a conflict erupts, it will not remain within the traditional political framework, but will extend across racial, religious, and ideological divisions, affecting groups such as whites and blacks, Christians and Muslims, and other societal factions. The consequences will be severe, with immense losses stemming from the fury that will surge through the population. This anger, driven by political, religious, and racial tensions, will culminate in devastation. Nature itself will respond, with destruction emerging from the San Andreas Fault." In June 2021, the elder made the following statement: "To prevent a conflict in the Black Sea Crimea region between Russian and NATO forces, a civil war may erupt in America, an inevitable uprising whether now or later. Many deeply troubling revelations will surface. Developments will unfold rapidly, with the military beginning to round up members of Congress and the government."
Okay, and again, this is an important portion here. A civil war may erupt in America, where we have the uprising. And again, let's go by history. That just about every world war every conflict has come about because of economic hardships. So this would not be unusual, but it's going to be worse, obviously. But this part here, many deeply troubling revelations will surface. Developments will unfold rapidly, with the military beginning to round up members of Congress and the government. The military rounding up Congress and government, basically the government, which sounds like a military coup. And when you think of what Colonel Macgregor said, this like French Revolution type coup here. Okay, so let me finish this up.
On September 14th, 2021, the elder made the following statement. The global economic collapse will begin in America. The dollar will become worthless, and the euro will vanish entirely. This financial breakdown will occur within an hour, at midnight, while the world sleeps, unaware of what is unfolding. In the words given, this moment will mark the lockdown of the banks.
Lockdown of the banks. So that's how that video ended. Thanks to the Holy Wisdom channel for sharing that information. Yeah. We see what's coming. And the handwritings on the wall, the writings on the wall, as they say. So this prophecy really isn't too hard to believe, right? And we know the prophecies of the Orthodox prophecies so far have actually come to fruition, unfolded. Some were fulfilled, and some are still unfolding. So I wanted to share that, and let's all pray. We all need to pray. And as we said, repent, ask for the Lord's mercy, to lessen, also mercy on us, but to lessen what is to come. You all, thanks so much for watching. If you like, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Share my videos if you'd like to. Like them if you think they're worth liking. Thanks so much for watching, as I said, for all your nice, kind comments and interesting questions and comments you've made on my under my videos, and for all of your support. Thanks so much. I hope you have a blessed evening.